With Jonathan Toews no longer a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, who's going to be the next captain of this historic franchise? Is it going to be Connor Bedard, Seth Jones, Connor Murphy, someone else? I'll dive into all of that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome on in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today is Friday, August 11th. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and show me some love on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you can also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. I'm really trying to boost the numbers up around the show right now, and it won't cost you anything. Subscribing is 100% free. It only takes a quick click of the button, and also that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. And also, just a quick reminder, go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram to have a chance to win some awesome free Blackhawks stuff with the giveaway that I'm having right now. I've recently posted some pictures on Instagram of all the items involved in the giveaway, and I believe I'm going to cap this once I reach either 225 or 250 followers on Instagram. So please make sure to go and follow the Instagram account if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, comment, all that good stuff. I appreciate the help in the SEO being driven in this direction. I greatly appreciate all of your support. All right, enough of that. Thank you all again, as always, for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you all for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. And on today's episode, as I'm sure you all are aware by now, based on the title of today's episode as well as the thumbnail, but I want to discuss who could be and who I believe will be the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. And obviously, this is a little bit of a weird topic to discuss, and one that us Blackhawks fans really haven't had to think about for, the last 2 decades almost, as Jonathan Toews obviously was the captain here in Chicago from 2008 until this last season wrapped up. We know that Jonathan Toews will not be brought back to the Blackhawks organization. There also is some pretty heavy rumblings about his future, and it does seem like it's a good possibility that Jonathan Toews could be hanging them up, as his name was not part of the list that was given out to all 32 teams that involve the free agents across the NHL. Jonathan Toews' name was not on that list. So we don't have anything set in stone at this point in time. We don't know for sure whether Toews is going to call it a career, but that's kind of what it's looking like at this point in time here in the offseason. But whether Toews comes back or whether he retires, that doesn't really matter for this conversation, because we know, of course, he's not going to be coming back to the Chicago Blackhawks. And for the first time in quite a while, Blackhawks fans, there is no captain of this prestigious organization. And with this being, a change in the eras kind of the Chicago Blackhawks, they went through the full-scale rebuild, obviously, got pretty lucky, and wound up with the number 1 overall selection. Connor Bedard is coming to Chicago here in the fall, but it's really been a changing of the guards the last couple of years for the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, seeing all the legends kind of exit Chicago, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Marian Hossa obviously had to retire. Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane were kind of the last 2 dominoes here, and now that they are gone, now that those dominoes have fallen, it's time to usher in a new era of Chicago Blackhawks. It's time for this franchise to kind of create some new faces of the organization. And with this being the spot that the Blackhawks are in right now, a really interesting question that I've been asked a ton in the comment section on YouTube, on Twitter, just friends or just random people who know what I do just ask me all the time, Jack, who's going to be the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks? And I've mentioned that this was a topic I really wanted to dive into here on the show. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Before I kind of talk about some of the prime candidates to be the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, I do kind of want to share my initial thoughts on this whole thing, the situation the Blackhawks are in right now. And then once I run through everyone, I'll give my opinion of who I think will be donning the next C here for the Chicago Blackhawks. But one thing that we have seen in recent years become more and more common across the NHL is teams electing to roll out multiple alternate captains in favor of just having one singular captain wearing the C on their chest. It's really become a pretty common theme in the NHL these days. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I know it's pretty close to, I believe it's above a third and maybe even closing in on half of the NHL teams don't have a captain and have kind of elected to go with this method. And given where the Blackhawks are at right here, right now, in their specific point in the rebuild, I kind of expect them to go with this method that's kind of been popular in the NHL for this upcoming season and perhaps for maybe even a couple more down the road. And the reason I say that, Blackhawks fans, is because the future of this organization, the reason we went into this rebuild and the reason we're excited now about the future of this organization is because of all the draft picks and all the prospects. I guess the draft picks turning into selections that the Blackhawks made. These are prospects we're super excited about, but a lot of them, they're 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. A lot of them are still years removed from being at the professional level and let alone the NHL level. And there's still so many unknowns when it comes to 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. And it's going to be some time until we know exactly which ones are going to have the opportunity to be special players at the NHL level. Now we have an idea of Kevin Korchinski, Connor Bedard, obviously, so on and so forth. We have an idea of which players could be future puzzle pieces, but we won't really truthfully know until we see them step on the scene and get that NHL action. They still have so much developing to do, both off the ice and on the ice. I mean, for those of you who are, older than 21 years of age, just think about how many unknowns there were in your life when you were 18, 19, 20 years old. I mean, you're still trying to figure it all out, trying to figure out what kind of person you are and everything that goes with being in that age group. So just because of that, just because the Blackhawks still are years away until really they're competing and that competitive window opens up full scale, until they have a multitude of these guys that they've drafted in the last couple of years under Kyle Davidson's lead, it's going to be a couple of years until they finally arrive. So I would honestly guess until that happens, I think the Blackhawks are going to go with this no captain, multiple alternates method that we've seen get popular in the NHL in the last couple of years, because truthfully, their best leaders and their most impactful players in this rebuild are a few years away simply from getting to the NHL. So that's just kind of my take. I think that's what the Blackhawks are going to go with for this upcoming season, and maybe even a couple more down the road, like I said. But of course, for the sake of the argument, let's go ahead and dive into some of these potential candidates. First and foremost, starting things off, I have Seth Jones, and I know there are probably a lot of you out there hating that idea, hating that I'm starting with Seth Jones, and I know there's a very, very fine line, it feels like, for Seth Jones here in Chicago in terms of how Blackhawks fans view him. It doesn't feel like there's any middle ground. It feels like you either hate Seth Jones or you like him and believe that he's probably better than kind of the narrative that's been thrown around his name these last couple of years. I'm probably more so on that side, but I certainly do understand that Seth Jones is not a perfect defenseman. He's overpaid. These are things that I've talked about in recent episodes here on the show. But you have to hear me out in terms of this argument to be the next Blackhawks captain, because Seth is obviously one of the few veterans on this Blackhawks roster at this very point in time. And even though he's still just 28 years old, he's going to be turning 29 in October, he already has 10 years of NHL experience under his belt, which is pretty ridiculous to think about. This is going to be Seth Jones's 11th NHL season. I mean, arrived onto the scene right as an 18-year-old after being the 4th overall pick in Nashville. He's already played in 730 NHL games, gotten some playoff experience with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's obviously also taken a little bit of a bigger step in the leadership department since coming here in Chicago. We've heard both Luke Richardson and Kyle Davidson speak out about that in the past. And then also, I know it's been a couple of years, but we did see Seth wear the A for the Blackhawks this past season, and he did wear the A as well for Columbus in his last 2 seasons there. He was also the captain for the United States Development Program back when he was 18, also captained the United States at the U18 World Juniors. So lots of good experience, 730 NHL games. It's been a while, but he does have experience being a captain. And I think more importantly than any of the stuff I just stated, though, Blackhawks fans, is the fact that Seth Jones has 7 years left on his contract here in Chicago. And for those of you hoping that the Blackhawks are going to buy him out or he's going to get traded, I just simply don't see it happening, because if he doesn't take those steps in these next few years to kind of reestablish himself as a true top pairing defenseman on a caliber NHL team, if he takes those steps, then I really doubt the Blackhawks are going to want to trade him unless there's an enticing enough offer. And if he doesn't take those steps, that maybe that's how I started this. I apologize if I worded all of this poorly, but if he doesn't take those steps, then there's going to be no interest from other NHL clubs at $9.5 million. The Blackhawks are not going to be retaining money and just bleeding money to get rid of Seth Jones. So I quite honestly think I expect Seth Jones to probably fulfill the entire 7 years left on his contract. And at the very least, he's going to be here for the next 5. He signed on for the long haul. That's really the main argument I would say for Seth Jones is he's cemented into this Blackhawks rebuild. And there really aren't, besides Connor Murphy, who I'll get to in a second, there really aren't any other veterans who are in the same situation that he is right now. So I also think one thing that goes a little bit under the radar is how he's taken this leadership role and how well he's kind of taken the Blackhawks rebuild on the chin over the last couple of years, right? Because when he waived his no movement clause to come here to Chicago, it was because this was looking like an intriguing team heading into that 2021 campaign, right? Marc-Andre Fleury, we see Stan Bowman trying to make one final run at it, and it absolutely falls flat on their face. Seth Jones didn't sign up for that, but he's handled it really well here. He's taken on a larger leadership role. And I know, again, there are not people who are fans. They're not, I know there are some Blackhawks fans out there who have this disdain for Seth Jones, but regardless of how you feel about him and regardless how you feel about his contract, you have to recognize that he's one of the top choices to be the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, one thing I will say, I do think he's got to pick up his play a little bit to be the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, right? This isn't something they're just going to be handing out to anybody. And that's why I also think they're more than likely going to wait to name their next captain. But I also think Seth Jones has to earn that seat. And well, I do think his play is better than the narrative around him. I don't think he's earned that seat yet here in Chicago, but undoubtedly he is one of the top choices for the Blackhawks. They don't have a ton at this very point in time. And I think Seth Jones is a very realistic choice for the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, there is the case to be made for Seth Jones as the next Blackhawks captain. Coming up in just a moment, I will get into whether Connor Murphy could be the man to don the C next here in Chicago. But first, I need to talk to you all about AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports your whole body health. And I gave AG1 a try and now drink it literally every single day, because I was so tired of taking so many supplements and I wanted a single solution that supports my entire body and covers my nutritional basis every single day. I drink AG1 bright and early in the morning, whether it's before I'm working out or whether I'm recording the show. I had my AG1 just prior to jumping on the pod here, or even if it's just to get my morning started as part of my normal routine. It really makes me feel unstoppable and I'm ready to go and have covered all of my nutritional basis. And thanks to AG1, covering my bases couldn't be any easier. I just mix 1 small scoop with water and drink it first thing in the morning. I also like it because it costs less than $3 per day, which is such a cheap and easy way for you to invest in both your health and your body. And to make it easy, if a comprehensive solution is what you need, then try AG1 and you'll also get a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. Again, that's drinkag1.com/NHL network to check it out right now. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to go and smash that subscribe button for me. I'm really trying to boost those numbers up at this point in time. And also, make sure you're following Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram to have an opportunity to win some awesome free Blackhawk stuff, courtesy of yours truly, right here on Locked On Blackhawks. All you have to do in order to enter this giveaway, you have to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram, follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. It's super easy. Do those two things. Also, send me a DM on Instagram showing that you're subscribed to the channel, or just send me a message that says you're subscribed. I can easily go and check it that way. And I've posted pictures on the Instagram account recently that shows you all the items involved in the giveaway, and the lucky winner will be able to select one item of their choosing. So make sure to go do all of that good stuff to keep growing the show, and also have an opportunity to win some cool free Blackhawks stuff. All right, segment 2. Next potential candidate that I want to discuss is none other than 30-year-old veteran defenseman Connor Murphy, who's now been here in Chicago for each of the last 6 seasons, and of course was involved in that controversial deal, a very controversial day for the Chicago Blackhawks back in 2016. Summer of 2016, I believe it was, when Artemi Panarin was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets and Nicholas Hjalmarsson was traded to the Arizona Coyotes. Both those deals led to then head coach Joel Quenneville storming out of a pre-draft meeting, and I understood it. And for Connor Murphy, his tenure here in Chicago did not get off to the best start. It's been a little bit of an interesting ride for Murphy over these last 6 years. And I remember that first year under Joel Quenneville, he really struggled to find his footing. He had issues kind of adapting to the defensive zone system that Joel Quenneville ran. He also got moved around to the left side when he's obviously a right-handed defenseman, was kind of just all over the place. And it led to a pretty unproductive first season and not the best start to his Blackhawks tenure. But then the 3 years after that first season, I thought Connor Murphy was the best defenseman for the Blackhawks by a mile, quite honestly. And this was, while he was at the end of his Blackhawks tenure, this was still when Duncan Keith was around and on this team. So I was really impressed with Connor Murphy's growth in those couple of years, and really emerged, in my opinion, again, as the Blackhawks' top defenseman for that 3-year stretch. Over the last 2 years, I kind of maybe I'm a little bit harsh on him, and maybe my expectations are too high now, but I just don't think Murphy has been quite as effective as he was during those 3 years, particularly when he was with Calvin DeHaan and when he was with Jake McCabe, who he of course, played with on the United States Development Program. They just really struggled to ever kind of have that shut down pairing together. And I didn't really understand it. But the one thing I will point out is it was nice to see Connor Murphy play a full season for the Chicago Blackhawks for essentially the first time since coming here, right? I mean, played in 80 games this season. That is a career high for him at the NHL level. But as far as the argument goes, the case for Connor Murphy to be the next captain of the Blackhawks, I quite honestly think it's pretty simple. He does have more captaincy experience than Seth Jones does, at least in recent years. You know, I talked about Seth captaining the development program and captaining the U18 World Juniors, but that was, well over 10 years ago. And Murphy, he's worn the A here in Chicago for each of the last 3 seasons. He's also been the captain for USA Hockey at the World Championships, and also has been an alternate there multiple times. I know Seth Jones was the captain for USA recently as well, but Murphy has more seasons of being a leader and representing the United States there. He was also an alternate captain way back when in his OHL days with the Sarnia Sting. He's been a leader for a while now, a vocal leader in the Blackhawks locker room. Is also the DJ for the Chicago Blackhawks. At least he was last season. I don't know if that's still going to be the case moving forward. Also is a guy who's very involved in the community. I know the Pride Night incident in particular was obviously a little bit of a shit show. But Murphy was the one who kind of speaks out on behalf of the Blackhawks. He was their King Clancy Trophy nominee leader, representative this year, and usually tends to be. So I think Murphy logistically makes the most sense to be the next Blackhawks captain. However, the one thing that I think is holding him back a little bit is, and it's his contract. And I'm not going to say 3 years is a short amount of time, especially given what the Blackhawks have with the rest of their roster. They have no one signed on long term. But 3 years, it's still kind of dicey with Murphy at 30 years old. Seth Jones is younger, signed on longer. It still kind of feels like it's up in the air as to whether or not Connor Murphy's going to be part of the rebuild here in Chicago. He's a little bit of a tweener, right? So I think that's kind of where the debate stems from, because as far as a leadership perspective, I give him the edge over Seth Jones, but is he going to be part of the future of this organization, or is he just kind of a filler defenseman? That's kind of the dicey thing around Connor Murphy. And we have heard some trade rumblings in the last couple of years. That's not to say that it's going to happen, but it certainly is in the realm of possibilities. That's just my one issue with Connor Murphy, is Seth is guaranteed to be here longer and he's younger. That's the issue that I have. But as far as leadership goes, like I said, Murphy has my vote. I just honestly think it's kind of a matter of how long he's going to be here in Chicago. And that's just a question that the front office and the coaching staff, I'm sure, have discussed, and I'm sure are thinking about when they're asking themselves a question like this. But again, with the Blackhawks in this current state and Murphy being 30, I don't see them rushing into a captaincy. And I think that kind of hurts Connor Murphy's chances a little bit. I do think he is still one of the top candidates, but and I do think logistically, in terms of his leadership, he's probably the best fit. But in terms of the direction of the franchise and kind of the outside things that go into it, if they were guaranteed to name a captain this year, I'd say Connor Murphy. In terms of long-term, though, I don't know if they want to do that this year. So that's why I kind of have some concerns about Connor Murphy wearing the next C. All right, there are my thoughts on Connor Murphy's candidacy. And don't go anywhere, Blackhawks fans, because coming up in just a moment, I'll talk about 2023 number 1 overall pick, Connor Bedard, and some other outside-the-box candidates to be the next Blackhawks captain. Segment 3, I have to talk about the new star coming to Chicago this fall, coming to a United Center near you soon. It's Connor Bedard, baby, and I really don't think it's crazy to put him into the mix for the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what he turns out to be, and he just turned 18 years old like less than a month ago. There's still a ton of unknowns that come with Connor Bedard, right? But I think the biggest thing that he has going for him in the NHL and in terms of being a potential next captain is that he's got the superstar upside. And there has been, it's always kind of been a common theme in the NHL, but definitely it feels like, I would say, over the last 10 years or so, it's been more common to see superstars or faces of the franchise be the ones to wear the C. It has been a little bit more common. And if he's going to be the forefront of this Blackhawks rebuild, if he's going to be the face of the franchise, it would make sense for him to be the next captain, assuming that he has those strong leadership capabilities as well. And while we don't really have much to go off of at Blackhawks development camp, we did hear Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson speak out about how Bedard is already kind of emerging as a leader here, how guys are just kind of attached to him because he has that superstar capabilities. There's so much buzz going about him. But what's awesome is, I've talked about this a lot on the show as well, Kyle Davidson just keeps speaking about what a good person he is. And we see that from Connor Bedard in the interviews that he has. And he just looks like a normal 17, 18-year-old kid with an awkward smile on his face, not really sure how to answer all these questions, not exactly comfortable in the limelight. But one thing that Kyle Davidson said was, Connor Bedard's just true to himself, and that's the leadership that he wants. He doesn't want anybody acting like someone they're not. He wants them to be comfortable, which is also another thing that you have to love to hear about this Blackhawks culture. And Connor Bedard could be a huge starter of that. And if he is, it would make sense for him to be the next captain. But we've heard Davidson say, guys are just kind of following his lead. He's just being himself. He's enjoying it. He's a really good kid. And those are all things that you love to hear in terms of the off-the-ice stuff of a potential superstar. It feels like Connor Bedard has checked off all the off-the-ice boxes that you want to see, and now it's just a matter of him going out there on the ice this fall, and let's see what he's made of. So I don't think it's crazy whatsoever to have Connor Bedard in the mix to be the next Blackhawks captain, especially because I just outlined how I do think the organization wants to be patient and wants to make sure they get this choice right. Obviously, the last guy that wore the C is probably the best one to ever do it in the history of this organization. And it's some pretty big shoes to fill. And I'm sure they want to do a good job and do all the due diligence necessary to not rush into a crucial decision like this. And I think that helps a guy like Connor Bedard, who's just arriving onto the scene now. And I'm sure as the years go on, hopefully he's only going to get better and better and is also going to become more mature and establish himself as more of a natural leader than he can be at, just 18 years old. Again, there are lots of unknowns still about Connor Bedard. We have to wait and see, but there is a pretty obvious case to be made for him as the next Blackhawks captain. First overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft. Couldn't be more stoked about Connor Bedard this fall, folks. I do want to quickly shout out a couple of other names that I think could be in the mix and I don't want to forget about because nothing is guaranteed. Who knows? Connor Murphy could be gone. Maybe one of these guys emerges the next Blackhawks captain. They do have a lot of good leaders in the prospect pool as well, which is something you love to see too. The first one I want to shout out is Cole Gutman, who, man, did he capitalize on his opportunity last year. Signed on as a UFA after the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he did not reach an agreement on an entry-level contract. And what a find it was for the Chicago Blackhawks. This guy looked incredible during development camp and in the preseason. And then later on in the year, after a pretty successful first half in Rockford, gets his opportunity with the Blackhawks. He looked really sharp, but more so than that, Gutman was the captain for the national champion Denver Pioneers during his senior season. He was also previously a captain for the Dubuque Fighting Saints of the United States Hockey League, and does look like he could be a future piece of the puzzle here in Chicago. Really big upcoming season for him. I do think there are more likely candidates, but I wouldn't rule out Cole Gutman whatsoever. I also think Alex Vlasic is a guy who feels like, I don't know if he's going to be wearing the C, but it feels like he could be a guy that wears the A for the Blackhawks for a long, long time. Still only 22 years old. Also wore the A for the United States development program and also wore the A for Boston University during his junior season. And it just feels like right now, and again, this is another unknown and maybe this changes in a couple of years, but it feels like he's the more outspoken and the vocal leader of this young defenseman core that's already turned pro. In comparison to Isaac Phillips and Wyatt Kaiser, at least, I think Alex Vlasic's the one who's kind of established himself more in that area. So I lean more towards Vlasic than Phillips or Kaiser at this point in time. But just like Connor Bedard and a lot of these youngsters, it's still a little early to know for sure. Lucas Reichel's another guy who some people have thrown in the mix. It's just kind of hard to tell with him at this point in time because he's only 21 years old and still, I'm sure, kind of learning English. And he just seems like a little bit of a gun-shy kid a little bit, right? Like he's still a little shy, seems a little timid, a little bit quiet, but I'm sure as he gets older, gets more and more experience, gets more confident and all that good stuff, I'm sure he's going to become more comfortable. And that's just something that happens with age. So I would say that Reichel has an outside shot, but you never know. And then I also want to throw in two guys who are making the leap to professional hockey this upcoming season, and Ethan Del Mastro and Nolan Allen. Both were captains in junior hockey before getting traded this past season. Nolan Allen was the captain of the Prince Albert Raiders, and Ethan Del Mastro was the captain of the Mississauga Steelheads. Out of those two, I'd probably guess Del Mastro at this point in time, since I believe he also wore an A in Sarnia after he got traded there. And then we also saw him wear an A for Team Canada at the World Juniors as well. And quite honestly, I'm higher on Ethan Del Mastro than Nolan Allen at this point in time. So I give Del Mastro the edge there, but both guys have shown some good leadership capabilities young in their careers. And you love to see the Blackhawks having multiple guys like this. It's never a bad thing to have multiple leaders, multiple guys who are outspoken, and having more guys like that in the locker room can't do any damage. So I really like that the Blackhawks have a lot of names in this box, especially if they're going to be waiting 2, 3, 4 years down the road before they make this decision. It's nice knowing that there are a lot of different options. But as far as my final guess that I'm going to go with, Blackhawks fans, it's not the most interesting option, I would say, but I'm going to go with Connor Bedard. If it's not Bedard, I will say I think it's Seth Jones. For Connor Bedard, I think it just makes too much sense. And I know he's 18 and we don't know for sure, but it's looking like he's going to be a superstar. And man, I knock on wood when I say that. I want to be real careful, but if he is as good, if he lives up to the hype and he is the kind of person that it so seems to be, I really think it's just a perfect fit for him to be the one wearing the C next here in Chicago, right? Like I can already see it in my mind, Connor Bedard wearing the C for years to come here with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think that makes the most sense. But I'm not going to rule out Seth Jones. I said Connor Murphy, I think, has the better leadership qualities, but I think Seth Jones just fits in better long-term with the organization because of his contract and his age. So I'm going to say Connor Bedard is going to be the next one to wear the C for the Chicago Blackhawks. But if it's not him, I'm going to be going with Seth Jones. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up Friday, August 11th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode or Monday's episode, not sure when the next one's going to be, but until the next time I talk to you all, everyone out there, enjoy your weekend. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.